So in the last video, we successfully logged in with our new methods. We checked the database if the user exists. We got the user data, we saved the user, we set this user as signed in, and then we navigate to our home screen. Now let's just improve in our user information screen. So we have to do a sort of like the same thing here. So after this is successful, our method is successful, let's save the user data locally. So we say save can say save user data locally. So here, after it's successful, let's also await our auth provider. Auth provider dot we need to await. Let's add async keyword here. Let's await here. So here, let's await auth provider dot save user data to shared preferences after we've just logged in. So once we save the user data to shared preferences, let's also set auth provider dot set sign in. That's something like the same that what we've just from doing. Then here let's say set signed in. Then after we set signed in, we can now navigate here. So let's say navigate to home screen. Let's cut this. Let's create this method and navigate. I think that's about it. Go to home screen. I think that's about it that we need to do here. Yeah, because after this is successful, we need to save the current user data to shared preferences and then set this user signed in and then go to home screen. That's all. So now the next thing to do is let's close this user information screen. The next thing to do is once we are in the application, and then when we log out, or let's say, as you can see right now, we are in the application, but when we know that we are signed in, and then we know that we have saved the user data to shared preferences, we also know that we have saved the user that is signed in. But when I run the application again, or when I close it, that means rerunning it is the same as stopping and running it the same as when the user just closed the application, kills it. When we run it, you'll see what happens. This application is starting from registration screen. Seeing that it's starting from here when we know that we have signed in. This is not what we want. We want it to know that this user is signed in. So for that, let's go back to our screens here, or in our authentication. Let's just add it here in our main screens. Let's have our landing screen. So for that, let's just right click here, or we can just put in our authentication. Let's right click in our authentication and then new dat file. Let's name it as landing screen. Then here, let's import our material package. Let's create a stateful widget and name it as landing screen, like that. here all we have to do is let's return a scaffold. So let's first create a body which will have a center widget. Let's have a child. For a child, let's just give it a circular progress indicator for now. Let's give it a color, colors dot, let's give it a accent color. I think for you can give it whatever you want, but for now let's just give it this, and then let's have our init state here. So inside our landing screen here, all we have to do is to check the authentication. So for that, down here, let's create our method to check. Here we just need to check if this user is signed in. We do the necessary steps and navigate the user to the correct page. Let's say void check authentication. Of course, there is a lot of ways to do all these things. This is just one of the ways that I'm doing it. So here, what we need to do is let's initialize our context, our provider class, final auth provider will be equals to provider. Let's import our provider. We'll say authentication provider, and then context, say listen false. We only want to listen once. Then here we will say let's check now, sorry, if await auth provider dot. Now we are checking the signed in status. If we come back here, we are checking this method now. We are checking the current, if this is signed in or what. So if we check this, if this returns true, which means we are signed in. So we are going to await again auth provider. If this user is signed in, we are going to get the data from Firestore. So after we check that if this user is, if it is signed in, we are going to get the data from Firestore. And then also after we get the data from Firestore, we are going to get data from shared preferences. So again, we are now going to get the data from our shared preferences. Get data from shared preferences. And then after this happens, we are going to navigate now. So here we'll do the same. We just say is signed in to true. Then let's create this method again. Then here, let's just come back to our, we can just copy this. Then come back to our landing screen. then paste it here. So if it is signed in, we want to navigate to home, and then if it's not signed in, we want to navigate to our registration screen. But let's copy this. We want to remove everything behind. Copy. Then let's paste. Here we want to go to our registration screen. Like that. And then what's the problem? Let's copy that. Then paste that here. Then let's again copy this. Then in the else, let's paste it. Then let's say false. So all we are doing here in our landing screen is we are checking if this user is signed in. We will get the data, and then we'll save the data in our shared preferences, and then we navigate to home screen. Here let's navigate to home. Then here navigate to register screen. Okay, like that. So all we are doing is checking if he's signed in, and then we are going to home. Else, if it's the new user, we are taking him to registration screen. So now we need to call our method here, check authentication. So the other thing that we need to do is let's go back to authentication, and then here where we are signing out the user, we also need to clear our shared preferences. So let's come down here, and then after we sign out, we just need to say shared preferences dot clear. So after we sign out, we also clear everything that we have saved before, so that when we start, when we sign out and start the application again, if it checks here, it's going to see that we are not signed in. We are not signed in, and then it will take us to our registration screen. That's about all that we need to do. Maybe let's also reset this before we can also set the is signed in back to false. Okay, and then next is we need to call this landing screen. This needs to be the first screen. So we come back to our main.dat, and then here in our main.dat, let's first come to our constants, then create the constant for our landing screen. Let's say landing screen. Okay, we can close that, and then here let's start with a landing screen. Let's copy this. Let's go our landing screen. Let's also name it here. So I'm going to restart the application and start it again. So when it starts, it should tell that we are signed in. It shouldn't come here because we haven't logged out yet. So let's stop it and run it. So the landing screen should be the first screen to start with, and then after it checks all this, should take us to the correct screen. Let's just see what will happen. So you can see this loading. We're in a landing screen, so the application is checking, and there it is. So the first thing is that it was showing this secular progress indicator, which means it was doing this method of checking, and then afterwards it took us to the home screen. So I think that's about it in the authentication. I think we are done doing our authentication now. Everything is okay. We can start working in our AI chat screen. So let's continue with that in the next video.